The courthouse loomed over the quiet morning street like a sleeping giant. Its stone facade was cold, gray, and unwelcoming, and the black iron gates seemed designed to intimidate rather than protect. Inside, the polished floors reflected the harsh fluorescent lights, making every step echo through the cavernous halls. The city had already begun its day outside, but within these walls, time slowed, as if the building itself held its breath. Everyone was waiting for the same thing: Emily Voss. She appeared at the end of the hallway, flanked by two deputies whose stoic expressions could not conceal the tension that radiated from the young woman between them. Emily was thin, almost frail, with pale skin stretched tight over high cheekbones. Her brown hair was pulled back carelessly, some strands falling across her forehead, giving her an unintentional wildness that contrasted sharply with the pristine, intimidating order of the courthouse. Her eyes were wide, a storm of fear, grief, and something unspoken that no one could read. The murmurs started immediately. People whispered her name as if it were a rumor that had come alive. "That's her. She looks smaller than I imagined. Do you think she did it?" The whispers trailed off as her gaze fell upon the courtroom itself. It wasn't just a room with chairs and a judge's bench. It was a theater of judgment, every seat a spotlight on those who would pass verdicts not just on law, but on character, reputation, and secrets. Emily's footsteps faltered. She gripped the edge of the deputy's arms, her fingers white with tension. The deputies exchanged a brief, silent glance. One of them whispered something low, almost like a prayer. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was elsewhere, retracing a night she wished she could forget but knew she never would. And then she saw him. Rico. The massive German shepherd stationed near the witness stand wasn't just any dog. He was a police dog, trained for obedience, for aggression when needed, and for intuition, almost preternatural. His sable coat shimmered under the courtroom lights, his muscular frame taut with silent authority. Emily's breath hitched, a sudden, sharp intake that drew the attention of the deputy nearest her. "Focus, Emily," he murmured. She shook her head almost violently, as if to shake away a memory, but her eyes stayed fixed on the dog. There was recognition there, unmistakable, deep, as if her soul had met his before. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear the haze clouding her mind, but it didn't help. She hadn't expected this. No one had. The prosecutor, a tall man with the kind of confidence that made people flinch, noticed first. He had been preparing for months, running through Emily's inconsistencies, the holes in her story, the facts that painted her as culpable. Yet even he paused when his gaze flicked to Rocco. The dog's ears pricked, his nose twitched, and the tail, usually a disciplined flag of control, twitched nervously. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make the seasoned prosecutor lean forward. "Something off," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. Emily's attorney, a middle-aged man named Thomas Gray with silvering hair and a reputation for keeping clients calm under pressure, noticed too. He stepped closer, murmuring, "It's okay, Emily, just a moment." His words were meant to soothe, but Emily barely heard them. Her focus remained locked on Rocco. She could feel the dog's awareness. It was as if he had sensed something, something she had never told anyone, something buried beneath the layers of fear and self-doubt. The courtroom itself was tense, every eye drawn toward the unusual interaction. Jurors shifted in their seats, some whispering, others watching in stunned silence. The gallery, packed with reporters and onlookers, leaned forward instinctively. Even the judge, an imposing figure who had presided over hundreds of cases and rarely flinched, raised an eyebrow. There was a quiet energy in the room, a collective intake of breath that spoke louder than words. Emily's footsteps carried her closer to the witness stand. Her shoes clicked against the polished floor, each step a metronome in the thick, tense silence. She stopped just short of the edge, as though the final inch would collapse her courage entirely. Rocco's eyes locked onto hers. The dog's body tensed, his muscles coiling as though he were preparing to leap, but not at her. His gaze was urgent, pleading, almost human in its intensity. The deputy nearest her whispered again, "Focus, you can do this." But Emily didn't move. She couldn't. Her mind replayed flashes from months ago, flashes she had buried deep. The night her fiancé had disappeared, the panic that had consumed her, the mistakes she had made, the secrets she had kept. And then fragments of a moment long forgot, a small, shivering animal in a storm, the way she had wrapped him in her coat, the warmth of life she had offered without thought. That was Rocco. That was the dog in front of her now. The prosecutor cleared his throat, drawing attention back to him. "Ms. Voss," he said, his voice cold but measured, "we will start with basic facts. Where were you the night of December 14th? Emily swallowed, but her throat felt raw. She could barely form words. She wanted to tell them, scream them even, but the sound caught in her chest. She felt the dog's gaze as if it were a tether, connecting her to the truth she had tried to hide. Rocco let out a low, almost imperceptible growl, the kind that travels through the room without making a sound. It was a warning and a signal all at once. Emily's body trembled. She pressed both hands to the edge of the stand, knuckles whitening. Her mind screamed at her to run, to flee from the scrutiny, from the shame, from the uncertainty of what might happen if the dog reacted fully. And then the unexpected happened. One of the deputies' radios crackled softly, a sound that seemed deafening in the heavy air. Rocco flinched violently, stepping forward, his paws scraping the floor just enough to make everyone in the courtroom tense. The handler adjusted his grip on the leash, speaking in a low, urgent tone, "Easy, Rocco, easy." Emily froze, her eyes darting between the handler and the dog. Her chest heaved. She wanted to speak but couldn't. The memories of that night, of the choices she had made, threatened to drown her entirely. Her vision blurred and she almost stumbled, but the deputies caught her, steadying her physically if not emotionally. A sudden gasp swept through the room. A juror's hand covered their mouth. A reporter whispered frantically into a recorder. Everyone sensed, even without understanding why, that this was no ordinary court session. The dog was not just a dog. He was a living, breathing revelation, a witness of instinct, memory, and truth in a way humans often could not be. Emily's attorney placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and reassuring. "Emily, look at me," he said. "Breathe, one step at a time." Her lips quivered. Her eyes darted to the judge, who gave a curt nod, signaling for the proceedings to begin. But Emily wasn't ready. Not for the questions, not for the judgments, not for the way the entire room seemed to pivot on a single, fragile moment. The interaction between a woman and a dog who once knew her, truly knew her. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that presses down on the lungs and makes every heartbeat thunder in the ears. Emily raised her gaze to Rocco again, and in that instant, it was as if a silent understanding passed between them. The dog, trained to obey, to protect, to detect, had recognized something she had tried to hide, and in that recognition lay the power to unravel everything, or perhaps to save her. No one moved. No one spoke. The courthouse had transformed into a stage of unspoken truths, and Emily stood at the center of it, trembling, pale, but unmistakably alive in the eyes of every observer. And then, just as the judge opened his mouth to begin, Emily's lips parted, not to speak, but to release a single breath, a whisper of a memory, a flicker of recognition that no one yet understood. It was the calm before the storm, the moment when everything hung suspended. And in that instant, every person in the courtroom knew one undeniable truth. This was no ordinary trial, and this was no ordinary woman. The doors closed behind her. The gavel hadn't even fallen, and yet the tension was so thick it could have been sliced with a knife. Every eye remained locked on Emily and the dog. Every mind buzzed with curiosity, dread, and anticipation. Because in the next moments, everything they thought they knew about this case, about Emily Voss, and about what had truly happened that night would begin to shift, and nothing would ever feel the same again. The courtroom fell silent, but not in the ordinary hush of respect for authority. This was a silence weighted with something heavier, anticipation, confusion, the kind of quiet that makes every whisper sound like a shout. Every eye in the room had followed Emily's trembling steps to the witness stand, but the focus shifted, almost imperceptibly at first, to the massive figure of Rocco, the police dog, standing alert near the front. Rocco was supposed to remain calm. He had been trained for everything: detecting explosives, following scent trails, restraining suspects, even ignoring distractions in the heat of a high-stress environment. He was the model of obedience, a machine of precision and instinct honed over 9 years. Yet from the moment Emily entered, he had become unpredictable. The first sign was subtle. His tail twitched. Not the controlled wag that sometimes appeared when he had completed a command, but a rapid, anxious flick, almost imperceptible if one wasn't watching closely. Then his ears pricked forward. His head turned slightly, following her every movement. The handler, Officer Daniels, noticed the change immediately, tensing his grip on the leash. "Easy, Rocco," Daniels muttered under his breath. His voice was calm, but his hands shook slightly. The dog's behavior was unusual. He had never reacted this way to a defendant, not ever. Emily froze, noticing the shift herself. She didn't understand why her chest tightened, why the familiar pang of memory cut through her nerves. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise as Rocco's gaze locked onto her like a spotlight. Her knees quivered, but she refused to step back. Something deep in her gut told her she couldn't. She had to face it, whatever it was. The jury leaned forward in their seats. The gallery of reporters stiffened, pens hovering over notebooks. Even the judge, a man who had seen countless cases unfold, frowned. He had never seen a trained police dog act with such obvious recognition in a courtroom setting. The first words from the prosecutor, Jason Klein, shattered the tense quiet. He was the kind of man who spoke with the authority of someone who already believed the outcome was predetermined. "Ms. Voss," he said, his voice smooth, almost silky, "you've claimed you were home the night of your fiancé's disappearance. Is that correct?" Emily swallowed, her throat dry, words trapped by a combination of fear, adrenaline, and the impossible sense that Rocco was silently demanding truth. Her voice caught. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Rocco shifted on the leash, stepping slightly toward her. The handler tightened his grip, whispering, "Stay, stay." But the dog's body was taut, coiled like a spring ready to release. His nostrils flared as he sniffed the air, and then came a sound, a low, guttural whine that seemed to vibrate through the floor and into every person's chest. A collective intake of breath swept through the room. The judge's gavel hovered in his hand, frozen mid-motion. Even the deputy sheriffs flanking Emily paused, unsure whether to intervene or watch. Emily's fingers clenched the edge of the witness stand. Her lips trembled. Memories she had tried to bury, memories of that fateful night, rose up like smoke from a fire she had thought extinguished. She remembered the rain, the darkness, the panic, the frantic search for someone she loved. And then she remembered Rocco, not as the dog before her now, but as the small, shivering animal she had found days before he became a police dog, wet, hungry, and terrified. She had taken him in, fed him, wrapped him in a blanket, and whispered, "You're safe now." She had thought it was a small act, insignificant. She had never imagined that the animal she saved would one day be sitting in a courtroom, poised to reveal truths she hadn't even realized were still alive. Rocco barked suddenly, loud and sharp, snapping the tension like a whip. The sound echoed off the stone walls. Some jurors jumped in their seats. The gallery erupted in murmurs. The judge slammed his gavel down, demanding order. Silence. Everyone remained silent. But no one could ignore it. Rocco's behavior was impossible to rationalize. He strained against the leash, whining, pawing the floor, eyes locked on Emily. The handler whispered urgently, "Boy, settle, settle." But it was no use. Emily's attorney, Thomas Gray, stepped forward, placing a calming hand on her shoulder. "Emily, listen to me. You're okay. Look at me. Breathe." Emily's eyes flicked to him but quickly returned to Rocco. Her throat moved as if she were swallowing words she couldn't form. Her heart thundered in her chest. This was no ordinary courtroom drama. This was something primal, instinctual, a silent communication between a human and a creature trained to detect deception, danger, and fear. And now the dog seemed to know something, something no human in that room could yet understand. The prosecutor's confidence faltered. Jason Klein's smooth, practiced demeanor cracked slightly as he studied the dog's behavior. "Does your dog usually react like this?" he asked, his voice tight, almost defensive. Officer Daniels shook his head, whispering under his breath. "Never. Not like this. He's never shown this level of recognition, not with anyone." Emily's chest tightened further. She realized that Rocco wasn't reacting to the courtroom, the noise, the crowd, or the prosecutor. He was reacting to her. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. Every person leaned forward instinctively, caught in a suspense that was no longer just about Emily's guilt or innocence. It was about a bond, a memory, a hidden truth manifesting through the behavior of a trained animal. The judge tried to regain control. "Ms. Voss, please answer the question." His voice was firm but carried an undertone of curiosity. Even he could not mask the intrigue in his tone. Emily opened her mouth. Words faltered, caught in her throat. She swallowed hard, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. Rocco whimpered again, stepping closer despite the handler's restraining hand. Emily froze, feeling a mixture of fear and recognition, realization and dread. The deputy whispered again, "Just a moment, you can do this." Emily's thoughts spun. Why is he reacting like this? Why now? The memories returned in sharp flashes. The rain-soaked night, the desperate search, the warmth she had offered Rocco when no one else would. She had saved his life once in a way that mattered more than anyone would ever know. And now the dog was returning the gesture in the only way he could, through recognition, loyalty, and instinct. Rocco barked again, more insistently this time, and then pawed at the floor, as if to urge her forward. Emily's hand trembled as she reached for the edge of the stand, steadying herself. She realized in a jolt that the dog was trying to communicate something vital, something that could shift everything in this courtroom. The gallery held its collective breath. Reporters paused mid-pen stroke. Jurors stared, faces pale. The judge leaned forward, his expression a mixture of authority and raw curiosity. Even the prosecutor stepped back slightly, uncertainty creeping into his posture. Then it happened. Rocco lunged forward slightly, not aggressively but purposefully, straining against the leash. The handler grunted, struggling to maintain control. Emily flinched, her heart racing. She had never seen him act this way before. No one had. A faint whisper ran through the courtroom, almost lost in the tension. "He recognizes her." No one could verify it. No one dared speak louder, but everyone felt it. The impossible connection between Emily and Rocco had created a silent shockwave, a collective awareness that something extraordinary, and perhaps dangerous, was unfolding. Emily's fingers dug into the stand. She drew a shaky breath. The dog, tense and insistent, seemed to urge her forward, toward a moment she had long avoided. The weight of the courtroom, the eyes, the judgment, the accusation, all of it seemed secondary to this primal, undeniable truth. Rocco had remembered her. The room was electric, every heartbeat synchronized with the dog's movements. The whispers grew into a low murmur, the kind of sound that spreads through a room like a premonition. Jurors exchanged nervous glances. Reporters scribbled frantic notes. The judge leaned back slightly, studying the scene with furrowed brows. Emily's lips trembled. Her hands were white-knuckled on the stand. And then, as if summoned by instinct, she whispered a single word, not loud, not commanding, but filled with recognition and trust. "Rocco." The dog's ears shot up. His body stiffened further, eyes wide, nostrils flaring. The handler whispered in urgent panic, "Boy, stay, stay." But Rocco ignored him. His focus was absolute. His body was a living arrow, pointing toward Emily, signaling something that no words could convey. The courtroom waited, Everyone waited, and in that silence the truth loomed imminent, undeniable, and terrifying. The first real fracture in the case had begun. The gavel's knock sounded hollow, almost drowned out by the electric tension filling the courtroom. Every eye was fixed on Emily Voss, who now stood rigid at the witness stand, her fingers trembling against the polished wood. Rocco, the massive German shepherd, had gone silent, but the intensity in his gaze was unbroken. He was a sentinel, a guardian, and now in this strange, unreal moment, he seemed almost human in the weight of his watchfulness. Prosecutor Jason Klein straightened his tie, his confident facade cracking just enough to reveal a flicker of unease. He had expected nerves from Emily, fear, perhaps guilt, but nothing like this. Nothing that made the jury lean forward instinctively, their collective curiosity sharpening to a blade. "Ms. Voss," Klein began, his voice carefully measured, "you have been called here today because your fiancé disappeared on the night of December 14th. You have stated repeatedly that you were at home, yet evidence suggests otherwise." Emily's throat tightened. Her voice threatened to betray her before she even opened her mouth. She swallowed hard, eyes darting from the judge to the jury, then back to Rocco, who remained utterly still, as if urging her forward. Klein continued, his tone sharpening like a scalpel. "Now, I'd like you to tell this court, step by step, exactly where you were that night and why your statements have been inconsistent." The silence that followed was oppressive. Each second stretched long and taut, every heartbeat magnified. Emily's lips parted, but her first words caught in her throat. The courtroom seemed to inhale with her, the air heavy with anticipation. Her attorney, Thomas Gray, leaned slightly toward her. "Breathe. You're okay. You can do this," he whispered. Her fingers dug deeper into the wooden stand as a memory, sharp and unbidden, pierced her mind. The night of December 14th, the wind howling against the windows, the rain lashing the streets, the cold metal of her fiancé's keys dropping from the countertop when he had a panic attack she couldn't calm. She remembered running out, calling his name, searching the darkened streets with nothing but a flashlight and desperate hope. And she remembered finding him on the edge of the river, unresponsive, cold, staring blankly at nothing. And she remembered Rocco. He had been only a puppy then, shivering, drenched, abandoned near the scene. She had taken him in without hesitation, wrapped him in her coat and whispered, "You're safe now." She had never imagined that he would one day be here in a courtroom, as if silently delivering justice in her stead. Emily finally spoke, her voice trembling, small at first, barely above a whisper. I wasn't home the entire night," she admitted. Heads turned, some in shock, some in disbelief. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor's lips pressed into a tight line, his expression tightening. The judge raised an eyebrow, and even the jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Klein's eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself, Ms. Voss. Why would you lie about your whereabouts? What were you doing?" Emily swallowed hard, trying to steady the quiver in her voice. I was looking for him, my fiancé. He has episodes, panic attacks, sometimes worse. That night I thought he might hurt himself. I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want to be stopped. I just needed to find him." A low murmur ran through the courtroom. Even those who had presumed her guilty found themselves pausing, questioning the narrative they had already built. Rocco shifted slightly, ears twitching, tail wagging just enough to convey his focus on her. His presence seemed to underscore her words, a living, breathing testament that Emily's story had an invisible witness. Klein's voice hardened. "Ms. Voss, are you suggesting that you were out alone in the middle of the night, in a city that was already searching for your missing fiancé and nobody noticed? And that somehow you—" Emily cut him off, her voice stronger now, fueled by the need to be heard, to be understood. "I had to. I couldn't wait. If I did, it would have been too late." The jury leaned in closer, captivated by the sudden intensity of her confession. The gallery of reporters scribbled furiously, the microphones capturing her every word. Even the judge seemed momentarily caught off guard, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Klein's composure was slipping. He pressed harder, trying to regain control of the narrative. "And what about your statements to the police, Ms. Voss? You told Officer Daniels that you were home. You told your attorney the same thing. Why lie?" Emily's gaze flicked to Rocco again. He stood, suddenly alert, as if waiting for her signal. Her mind raced, heart hammering. The memory of the dog's instincts, the loyalty, the unwavering bond they had shared, gave her the courage to continue. "I didn't lie," she said firmly. "I withheld the truth. I panicked. I thought if anyone knew I was out there searching for him, they would stop me, and I couldn't risk that. I couldn't risk losing him before I even had the chance to help him." A gasp traveled through the courtroom. Some jurors whispered to each other. A few shook their heads in disbelief. The prosecutor's jaw tightened. This wasn't the fragile, broken woman he had expected to confront. This was someone with depth, with history, with moral conviction, even if it came tangled in fear and desperation. Emily's attorney took a careful step forward, his voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, if I may, the witness's statements are consistent with someone who acted out of extreme stress and concern for another human being. The court should consider that context before jumping to conclusions about truth or deception." The judge nodded slowly, acknowledging the point. "Noted, Mr. Gray, but we still must determine the facts." Emily drew a shaky breath. She could feel the courtroom holding its collective breath alongside her. Rocco's attention never wavered, his eyes locked on her as though he could see straight into her soul. She knew that he trusted her. He had recognized her. And now, more than ever, she needed to trust herself. Klein leaned closer, voice dropping to an almost conspiratorial tone. "Ms. Voss, there are reports that suggest your fiancé was last seen near the river that night. Were you aware of this?" Emily's stomach churned. The river, the dark, relentless stretch of water where fear had clawed at her chest. She clenched her fists against the stand. Her voice shook, but she answered, determined to be honest. "Yes, I was aware. That's why I went there. That's why I had to be there before something worse happened." The courtroom murmured again, the sound swelling like a tide. Jurors exchanged glances. Emily's honesty, combined with the silent presence of the dog who had once been a helpless puppy she had saved, shifted the atmosphere. It was no longer a case of accusation. It had become a story of fear, instinct, and unspoken courage. Klein's face darkened. He needed control, needed to drive a narrative of guilt. "And yet," he said, packing slightly, "there is no record of you searching for him. No witnesses saw you. No security cameras captured your movements. You expect this court to simply take your word for it." Emily's eyes darted briefly to Rocco. The dog's body was tense, ears forward as though urging her to speak the next truth. She felt a surge of resolve. "I have evidence," she said softly, almost too quietly for the room. "Not humans, but him." She gestured toward Rocco. "He remembers." The courtroom froze, the gallery gasped. Klein stopped packing, blinking in disbelief. The judge leaned forward. "Explain." Emily swallowed hard. "Rocco, he was with me that night. He remembers where I went, what I did. He can confirm that I was searching for my fiancée, that I wasn't lying about my intentions. He recognizes me." A stunned silence fell. Rocco whined softly, pawing at the floor, then looked at Emily with eyes full of loyalty and focus. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone in the room. This was not just testimony. It was a living, breathing witness to truth, memory, and bond that defied explanation. Klein's lips pressed together, and for the first time, the confident prosecutor faltered. He had anticipated lies, manipulation, or at least confusion. He had not anticipated a dog serving as a silent witness to truth, a loyal observer whose instincts cut deeper than any human testimony. The judge's gavel hovered. He studied Emily and Rocco, weighing every subtle cue, every nuance. "Ms. Voss," he said slowly, "we will proceed carefully, but the court takes note of your claims. "Officer Daniels, please ensure the dog's behavior is documented for the record." Rocco sat back slightly, tail wagging faintly, as if acknowledging the gravity of the moment. Emily exhaled, a trembling breath, feeling the tension begin to ebb just enough for her to continue. She had survived the first wave of questioning. She had begun to reclaim the narrative piece by piece, bolstered by the memory of what she had done that night and the silent, loyal presence of the dog who had never forgotten her courage. But even as she steadied herself, the unspoken question lingered in every mind. If the dog remembered her, what else did he know? And more importantly, what else had been left hidden from the court all this time? The courtroom felt like it had contracted, the air thick with tension so palpable it pressed against every chest. Emily Voss sat rigid at the witness stand, but inside her mind was a tempest. The first wave of questioning had left her exposed, trembling, yet somehow alive with the electricity of truth. Rocco, the massive German shepherd, remained at her side, a silent sentinel of recognition and loyalty, his eyes unblinking as if daring anyone to doubt her. The prosecutor, Jason Klein, attempted to regain control, packing like a predator circling a wounded prey. His face was a mask of determination, but cracks appeared at the corners of his mouth and eyes. He had not anticipated Emily's emotional fortitude, or the almost supernatural bond she shared with the dog who had once been a helpless puppy she had saved. "Ms. Voss," he said, voice sharp, "you claim Rocco can verify your story. Can you explain to this court exactly how a dog, no matter how well trained, can provide factual testimony?" Emily's lips trembled. She could feel the weight of every eye in the courtroom, the scrutiny, the disbelief. Her voice shook at first, soft and fragile, barely audible. I don't know how to explain it in human terms," she admitted. "But he remembers. He remembers where I went, what I did, and why I was there. He knows the truth of that night." A whisper swept through the jury. The gallery of reporters leaned forward, pens hovering, capturing every word. Even the judge's steely gaze softened slightly, curiosity flaring in his eyes. Klein pressed harder. "Are you suggesting this dog can testify, that the jury should accept your word based on a canine's memory?" Emily's chest heaved. Her fingers gripped the edge of the stand so tightly her knuckles were white. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, threatening to overwhelm her. "I'm not asking them to take my word. I'm asking them to understand that there is a witness who saw everything, who remembers everything, and who is loyal enough to recognize me." Rocco shifted slightly, his paws scraping against the floor. The movement was small but deliberate, as if punctuating her words. A reporter in the back of the courtroom whispered, "He's reacting. He knows her." Klein's jaw tightened. He pivoted, trying to corner her with logic and evidence. "Ms. Voss, there are inconsistencies in your statements. You told Officer Daniels you were home. You told your attorney the same. Yet you now claim you were out searching for your fiancé. Why did you lie?" Emily's breath hitched. Her mind raced back to that night, the storm, the fear, the panic. She remembered the cold, the darkness, the terror gripping her chest as she ran through empty streets searching for him. And she remembered Rocco, shivering under her coat, a fragile life in need of protection. She had been desperate, terrified of losing someone she loved, and instinct had driven her to act without thinking. "I didn't lie," she said finally, voice trembling but gaining strength. "I panicked. I didn't want to risk being stopped. I had to find him. I had to save him before it was too late." The courtroom murmured again, a wave of reaction rippling through the jurors and spectators alike. Even the judge leaned forward, curiosity and tension etched across his face. Rocco whined softly, tail twitching, his eyes fixed on Emily with unwavering focus. His instincts, honed by years of training, were amplifying the truth of her words in a way no human testimony could. Emily felt a surge of courage at that glance. She wasn't alone. She had an ally, a witness who could not be swayed by opinion or fear, a being whose loyalty and memory were absolute. Klein's voice became sharper, almost accusing. Ms. Voss, if your story is true, why are there no witnesses? Why do no security cameras or traffic records corroborate your presence outside your home that night? Emily's throat tightened again. The questions clawed at her, each one a blade threatening to tear apart the fragile composure she had managed to maintain. She swallowed hard, drawing strength from the silent presence of Rocco. I didn't think about cameras or witnesses. I was focused on him, on finding him before it was too late. The jury leaned forward, hanging on her every word. The gallery scribbled furiously, the murmurs swelling into a low hum of fascination and disbelief. Even the judge seemed momentarily caught off guard, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Klein's face darkened. He needed control. He needed to reassert the narrative of guilt. And yet, Ms. Voss, we have evidence suggesting your fiancé was found in a different location at a time inconsistent with your claimed movements. How do you reconcile that? Emily's hands gripped the stand so tightly it hurt. Her mind raced, panic threatening to overtake reason. She felt tears prick her eyes, hot and unwelcome. Her chest heaved as memories of that night surged forward. The rain-soaked streets, the cold water of the river's edge, the frantic calling of his name, and Rocco, shivering and frightened, pressed against her side, a silent companion in terror and hope. I made mistakes, she whispered. I didn't know the exact timing. I didn't know how to control it, but I was there. I was searching. I was trying to save him, and Rocco, he remembers. The courtroom went still, each person caught in the gravity of the moment. Even Klein faltered, searching for words that could challenge a story carried not by evidence alone, but by loyalty, instinct, and human emotion. Emily's attorney, Thomas Gray, stepped forward. Your Honor, the witness is experiencing extreme emotional distress. The court should consider the context of her testimony, the stress, the fear, the trauma. Her statements are consistent with someone who acted out of love and desperation. The judge nodded slowly, signaling for calm. Noted, Mr. Gray, but we must proceed. Please continue. Emily drew a trembling breath, her vision blurred by unshed tears. She felt the weight of the courtroom, the jury, the gallery pressing down on her. And yet she felt something else, a surge of courage from Rocco's unwavering presence. The dog's gaze locked with hers, unflinching, unjudging, filled with recognition and trust. Her voice strengthened, trembling but resolute. I know I've made mistakes, I know I've been afraid, but I have to tell the truth. I have to tell what really happened that night. Klein's lips pressed into a thin line. He had expected fear, expected hesitation. He had not expected a declaration fueled by raw emotion and the silent affirmation of a living witness, an untrained witness, yet more truthful than any human could claim to be. Emily's eyes darted around the room, finally resting on the jury. I was out there that night searching for him, she said, voice gaining strength with each word. I didn't think about cameras or witnesses. I didn't think about how it would look. I just knew I had to find him. And Rocco, she looked at the massive German shepherd whose body was tense till low, eyes unwavering, he remembers. He was with me. He saw everything. He can tell the truth. A stunned silence fell. The courtroom felt suspended in time. The gallery gasped. Reporters whispered urgently into their recorders. The judge leaned forward, lips pressed tight, eyes fixed on the pair. Even the prosecutor, confident only moments ago, seemed momentarily paralyzed. Rocco whined softly, stepping slightly closer to Emily, his paw scraping the polished floor. His body was taut, every muscle coiled, yet his focus never wavered. He was telling the court in the only way he could that Emily's words were not lies, that the events she described were real, that she had been searching, desperate, and driven by love. Emily's breath came in shaky gasps. Tears rolled down her cheeks, hot and unrestrained. The courtroom had transformed from a chamber of judgment to a theater of raw emotion, of instinct, of loyalty. The story had shifted. The narrative of accusation and suspicion had begun to unravel, replaced by something more profound. A human truth validated by instinct, by a bond that transcended language. And then, as if sensing the peak of tension, Rocco let out a single, sharp bark, directed not at Emily, not at the prosecutor, but at the heart of the courtroom itself. Every person froze. The sound carried a weight, a declaration. It was not aggression. It was recognition. It was testimony. It was the truth, unspoken but undeniable. Emily's voice rose, trembling yet firm. "I was there. I did what I had to do, and he remembers." The courtroom went utterly silent. Even Klein, ever the master of control, could not break the spell. The gavel hovered in the judge's hand, as if unsure whether it could punctuate the moment or whether it would shatter the fragile tension that had settled over everyone. The breakdown had begun, not just of Emily's fear, but of the courtroom's expectations, of the assumptions, of the narrative itself. The unassuming dog at her side had become the unlikely arbiter of truth. And the court, the jury, the gallery, all were caught in the suspense of what would happen next. Because everyone in that room understood, in a visceral, unspoken way. This was no ordinary testimony, and this was no ordinary witness. The tension lingered, thick and suffocating, as the first cracks in the prosecution's case began to form. Emily's breakdown had not been weakness, it had been revelation. And now the courtroom waited, hearts pounding, for what would come next. The courtroom remained in stunned silence, the weight of Emily's confession and Rocco's unwavering presence pressing down on every spectator, juror, and officer present. It was a silence that demanded attention, a pause in time that made every sound, every rustle of paper, every shallow breath, magnified to an almost unbearable intensity. The first cracks in the prosecution's carefully constructed case were showing, and no one knew how far they would spread. Prosecutor Jason Klein's jaw tightened as he recovered from the unexpected blow. He had faced stubborn defendants before, manipulators and liars skilled at weaving stories, but he had never encountered a witness whose ally was a silent, instinctive observer, a creature whose loyalty was pure and whose recognition was absolute. He forced himself to step forward, straighten his tie, and regain control. "Ms. Voss," he said, voice steady, though a hint of tension betrayed his inner frustration, "you've claimed that Rocco was with you that night, that he remembers. Yet dogs, no matter how well trained, cannot provide testimony in the manner humans can. You realize that, correct?" Emily's chest heaved, but her gaze remained locked on Rocco. The dog's ears pricked, his stance tense yet calm, as if acknowledging her silent communication. She nodded slowly. "I know he can't speak like humans," she said softly, "but he can show the truth. He can lead us to it." The courtroom shifted uncomfortably. The gallery of reporters whispered amongst themselves, scribbling notes frantically, sensing that the ordinary procedures of a courtroom were about to be disrupted. Jurors exchanged glances, uncertain, yet captivated. Even the judge leaned forward, intrigued, a faint crease forming between his brows as he considered the implications. Klein pressed on, his voice sharper. "Lead us to it. Ms. Voss, what are you suggesting? That a dog's memory, his instincts, should outweigh documented evidence, eyewitness testimony, and forensic analysis?" Emily swallowed hard. The words felt heavy in her throat, but she drew a shaky breath and spoke with quiet conviction. "I'm suggesting that sometimes the truth isn't only on paper, Mr. Klein. Sometimes it's in the instincts of those who were there. Rocco, he was there. He saw what I saw, and if we follow him, we might uncover what has been hidden all along." A low murmur ran through the courtroom. Some jurors leaned forward, curiosity sparking in their eyes. Reporters exchanged astonished glances. The judge raised an eyebrow. "This is highly unorthodox," he said, his voice measured. "But the court will allow it within reason. Officer Daniels, please ensure the dog's behavior is documented." Officer Daniels stepped forward, leash in hand, clearly tense. He glanced at Rocco, who sat obediently but with a focus that radiated anticipation. "Boy, let's show them, huh?" Daniels murmured. Rocco's ears flicked forward and he shifted slightly, his gaze locked on Emily. The first shock came as Emily leaned slightly forward. "Rocco remembers the path," she whispered. "Follow him, you'll see where I went." The judge's eyes widened and murmurs erupted across the courtroom. The gallery of reporters rustled, cameras clicking and microphones poised. Jurors sat forward, caught between disbelief and intrigue. Klein's mouth opened, then closed again, unable to find words. Emily took a deep breath. "I'll guide him," she said. "He won't lead anyone astray, he won't make mistakes." Thomas Gray, her attorney, stepped beside her, placing a calming hand on her shoulder. "Your Honor, if I may, this is a critical moment. The court will see that Rocco's instincts are unparalleled, that his loyalty and training provide an accurate reflection of events. This is not manipulation. It is evidence in its purest, instinctive form." The judge nodded slowly. "Very well, we proceed." Emily rose, holding Rocco's leash in her trembling hands. The dog's massive form moved gracefully, coiled like a spring ready to release energy at a moment's notice. The gallery was silent, the tension so dense it seemed to press against the walls. Emily's voice trembled as she gave the first instruction. "Show them, Rocco. Lead the way." And then Rocco moved. It was slow at first, deliberate, every step calculated yet filled with energy. He padded toward the exit of the courtroom, leash taut but controlled, his eyes never leaving Emily. Every person in the room leaned forward, captivated. Even Klein took a half step back, uncertainty flickering in his expression. Emily followed, voice low but resolute. "This is where I started searching," she said, gesturing slightly toward a corner of the room, her fingers trembling. "The moment I realized he might be in danger." The courtroom shifted from formal procedure to silent observation. Reporters held their breaths, jurors watched as if witnessing something impossible, and the judge's gaze was fixed on the dog's every movement. Rocco's tail was low but stiff, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air with an intensity that made the room seem to pulse with anticipation. Then, without warning, Rocco stopped abruptly. His head tilted slightly, nose quivering, body tense. He pawed at the floor once sharply and let out a low, urgent whine. Emily froze. She recognized the signal immediately. He had found the first point of significance. Her voice was barely a whisper. "This is it," she said. "The first place I saw him." Klein's face darkened. "This is absurd. You're suggesting a dog can identify evidence on instinct. This is preposterous." Emily's gaze did not waver. "No, he doesn't lie. He remembers exactly what happened. He was there. He knows the truth." The tension in the courtroom reached a breaking point. The judge leaned forward, fingers interlocked. "Officer Daniels, what do you make of this?" Daniels hesitated, gripping the leash tightly. "Sir, I've been with Rocco for over 9 years. He's trained for everything, explosives, missing persons, tracking scents, but I've never seen him react like this. This is different. He's not just following a scent, he's reacting to memory, to recognition. He knows something important. I can't explain it, but it's undeniable." The jurors shifted, whispering among themselves, eyes wide. The gallery of reporters erupted in urgent chatter. Even Klein's calculated demeanor faltered, replaced by a creeping uncertainty. Emily knelt slightly, whispering to Rocco, "Find them, boy, lead them to the truth." The dog responded immediately, moving with renewed purpose, his eyes sharp and focused. He padded toward a corner of the room where a small evidence table had been set up for demonstrative purposes. His nose flared, tail stiff, and he pawed insistently at the table. Emily's voice trembled as she spoke to the court. "This is where I found the first clue, the first evidence that something was wrong, that he needed help." Klein's protests were sharp but faltering. "This is theater. This is manipulation of the court. A dog cannot determine guilt or innocence." Emily stood, her resolve hardening. "I'm not asking him to determine guilt. I'm showing you the path. He remembers. and if you follow it, you'll understand everything I've tried to explain." Rocco whined again, stepping forward and pawing at the table more insistently. Daniel struggled to keep up with him, leash taut but controlled. The gallery was silent, hanging on the unfolding scene, every eye locked on the massive dog as he demonstrated what Emily had described. And then it happened, the first shock, a piece of evidence no one had expected. Hidden under a stack of papers on the table, Rocco's paws uncovered a small, blood-stained jacket. It was unmistakably the jacket Emily's fiancé had been wearing the night he disappeared. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. The jury sat frozen, reporters scribbling furiously, and even Klein's composure shattered. He stepped forward, disbelief written across his face. That wasn't discovered until now. How? Emily's voice rose, steady and unwavering despite her trembling. Because no one looked where they weren't supposed to, but he remembered. Rocco remembered where it was hidden. He was there with me. He knows the truth. The courtroom went utterly silent, the magnitude of the moment sinking in. A dog, a loyal, instinct-driven animal, had led them to evidence that had eluded investigators, lawyers, and detectives for weeks. The first shock of the trial had arrived, and with it, the beginning of a shift that no one could ignore. Rocco sat obediently, tail low but still tense, eyes locked on Emily, as if to say this is only the beginning. And the court understood, in a way that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The story was far from over. The first shock had been delivered, and the truth was beginning to unravel. The courtroom was electrified, every spectator frozen in disbelief, every juror caught between skepticism and awe. The revelation of the bloodstained jacket had shattered the assumptions that had held the case together like fragile glass. Rocco, sitting obediently beside Emily, exuded an intensity that radiated through the room. His gaze never left her, a silent promise that the story was far from over. Jason Klein's hands clenched the edges of the podium, knuckles whitening. The confident, commanding prosecutor who had stormed into the courtroom earlier now looked like a man grasping at thin air. This is preposterous," he barked, though the conviction in his voice was faltering. "A dog leading us to evidence. How can this be admissible? How can this be considered?" The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Mr. Klein, this court acknowledges the unusual nature of this demonstration. However, the evidence must be examined. Officer Daniels, proceed carefully and document everything." Emily tightened her grip on Rocco's leash. Her heart pounded, a mix of fear and adrenaline. She had known the dog's memory was extraordinary, but witnessing the courtroom's reaction made it all surreal. The silence was thick, a living entity pressing down as she gave Rocco his next command. "Lead them to the next place," she whispered, barely audible. "The place where I found him." Rocco sprang into motion, his massive paws barely making a sound on the polished courtroom floor. He navigated with precision, weaving past chairs, officers, and jurors, stopping only when his nose caught a faint trace of what he recognized. Emily followed closely, heart in her throat, sweat prickling at her temples despite the winter chill outside. The gallery watched intense fascination as Rocco approached a small, overlooked corner near the evidence table, where several folders and boxes had been stacked haphazardly. He pawed insistently at a box labeled Personal Effects, Pending Review, then whined, low and urgent, his nose pressed to the edge. Emily knelt beside him, the tremor in her hands betraying her fear. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where I found the note." Klein's face twisted in disbelief. "A note? What note?" he demanded. Emily's eyes, rimmed with tears, scanned the small stack of papers. Carefully, she pulled out a folded scrap, yellowed with age but unmistakable, a handwritten note in her fiancé's familiar script. The words were partially obscured, smudged by rain, but the message was clear. "I can't stay. I need help. Go to the old warehouse on 14th. Rocco will guide you." The courtroom erupted into murmurs, disbelief mingling with astonishment. Jurors exchanged incredulous glances. Even the judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, lips pressed tight. Klein stammered, attempting to regain control. This is impossible. A dog leading you to a note. That's circumstantial at best, and I'd argue it's irrelevant. Emily's voice cut through the din, clear and steady despite the tears streaming down her face. No, it's not irrelevant. It's proof. Proof that I followed him, that I was searching for him, that I did everything I could to save him. Rocco whined again, stepping forward as if confirming her words. His paw pressed firmly against the note, his gaze unwavering. It was not just instinct, it was recognition. The dog remembered the events of that night as vividly as Emily did, and now, in this courtroom, he was proving it. Officer Daniels carefully lifted the note and handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "Your Honor," Daniels said, voice low, "I've been with Rocco for years. I've seen him track scents, locate missing persons, even detect substances humans cannot perceive. But I've never witnessed anything like this. This is memory, recognition, loyalty. He's leading us to truth." The jurors leaned forward, caught between the surreal spectacle and the undeniable reality of what they were witnessing. Emily's attorney, Thomas Gray, stepped closer. "Your Honor, the dog's actions are consistent, precise, and verifiable. He has led us to critical evidence that corroborates my client's testimony. This is not theater. This is instinct and loyalty providing evidence the court cannot ignore." The judge nodded slowly, scanning the note, then looking at Emily and Rocco. "Very well. The court acknowledges the significance of this discovery. We will review the note, its contents, and its relevance. Officer Daniels, continue to document Rocco's actions." Emily knelt beside Rocco, whispering in his ear. "Good boy, Rocco, one more step, show them the final place." The dog's ears twitched. He rose, moving with deliberate precision toward a section of the courtroom near the jury box. His nose was close to the floor, sniffing intently, muscles coiled in anticipation. Emily followed, her breath shallow, heart hammering. She knew what awaited, what they would uncover next. Rocco stopped abruptly in front of a small, locked evidence cabinet, the kind often overlooked in the chaos of investigations. He whined, pawed, and pressed his massive head against the lock, his body tense, every instinct screaming urgency. Emily's voice trembled as she addressed the court. "This is where I found him," she said. "The place no one thought to check, where he was hiding or being kept. Rocco remembers exactly where it was, and he led us here." Gasps swept through the courtroom. The jury leaned forward, murmurs escalating into whispers of astonishment. Reporters furiously typed, capturing every moment, every detail, the tension almost unbearable. Klein's composure crumbled. This is preposterous. Dogs cannot. Emily turned to him, her eyes blazing with quiet intensity. "Rocco isn't just a dog," she said. "He's a witness. He saw everything, he remembers. And now, because of him, the truth is coming out." The judge gestured toward the bailiff. "Open the cabinet. Let us see what the dog has led us to." With hands trembling, the bailiff unlocked the cabinet. Inside, nestled among folders and equipment, were items that made the courtroom collectively inhale in shock. Her fiancé's jacket, soaked and mudded, a torn photograph, and a small, blood-stained journal. The journal's pages were waterlogged, but legible enough to reveal entries detailing fear, desperation, and a hidden threat that no one had uncovered until now. Emily's voice shook but remained steady. "This is the evidence no one thought to look for. Rocco remembered where it was because he was there. He was with me that night. He led me to him. And now it proves everything." The jurors sat frozen, the gallery silent save for the scribbling of notes. Klein's mouth opened and closed, words failing him. For once, he was unarmed in the courtroom, stripped of the control he had taken for granted. Rocco, still standing beside Emily, let out a low, satisfied whine, then lowered himself onto his haunches, tail wagging faintly. His mission, as he understood it, was accomplished. He had led them to hidden evidence, corroborated Emily's story, and shattered the narrative that had painted her as dishonest or negligent. The judge finally spoke, his voice measured but heavy with gravity. The court acknowledges the discovery of this evidence, its chain of custody, and the extraordinary circumstances under which it was located. We will proceed with the trial, taking this into account. The court will also consider the dog's actions as corroborative in nature, given the documented behavior. A low murmur ran through the courtroom. Reporters whispered excitedly. Jurors exchanged stunned glances. Even Klein's expression betrayed the realization that the trial had shifted irrevocably. Emily knelt beside Rocco, stroking his head gently. "Good boy," she whispered. "You did it. We found everything." But the tension lingered. The hidden evidence was out, the courtroom electrified with revelation, yet Emily knew that this was only the beginning. Rocco had uncovered the first layer, but there were deeper secrets still buried in the shadows of that night, truths that had remained hidden even from her. And as she looked into the dog's unblinking eyes, she understood. He would lead her there too. Because the night's story was far from finished, and the court had only just begun to grasp the full depth of what had happened. The hidden evidence had been revealed, but the real truth was still waiting to come to light. The courtroom felt suspended in time, the air thick with disbelief and the silent roar of revelation. The hidden evidence, the blood-stained jacket, the torn photograph, and the journal, had shifted everything. Jurors leaned forward, eyes wide, trying to process a story that had previously seemed improbable. The gallery whispered in astonishment, cameras clicking furiously, as the reality of Emily Voss's account began to solidify in the minds of everyone present. Emily remained kneeling beside Rocco, the massive German shepherd still tense but composed, eyes sharp and fixed on her. His presence radiated certainty and loyalty, and Emily drew strength from it. This was more than a dog. This was a witness, a guide, a keeper of truth. And the truth, as she had feared, was far deeper and darker than anyone in the courtroom could have imagined. Prosecutor Jason Klein's face was a mask of frustration and disbelief, his voice now tight with fury. "This is nonsense. Even if the dog led you to these items, these personal effects, how do you prove their connection to the events you describe? How do you prove that what is written here is anything more than coincidence?" Emily rose slowly, her knees aching, and turned to face the courtroom. The tears on her cheeks glistened under the harsh fluorescent lights, but her voice was unwavering. "This isn't coincidence, it's memory, it's instinct, and it's proof of what happened that night. Every piece of evidence, every step we took," Rocco remembered. "He was there. He saw everything." Klein's hand trembled slightly as he held his notes, frustration simmering beneath his carefully controlled exterior. He had spent weeks constructing a case built on timelines, witness testimony, and forensic analysis. He had been certain that Emily's story was fragile, easily shattered by logic and facts. And yet here she stood, backed by the uncanny memory and precision of a dog, systematically unraveling his arguments. Emily's attorney, Thomas Gray, stepped forward, voice steady and commanding. "Your Honor, this is not speculation. We have documented the dog's behavior, his responses to Emily's commands, and the discovery of evidence directly connected to the events of that night. The court must consider the verifiable actions of Rocco as corroborative evidence, not just theatrics." The judge nodded, rubbing his temples as he tried to maintain order in a courtroom that had shifted from structured proceedings to a theater of suspense. "Proceed," he said, "but keep the testimony focused. This court will allow for the unusual circumstances, but all statements must remain relevant to the case." Emily took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the jury. She knew she had only one chance to make them understand, not just the evidence, but the story behind it, the danger, the fear, the desperate search that had defined that night. "It started with a storm," she began, voice soft yet intense. "Rain pounding the streets, thunder shaking the windows. He didn't come home that night. I called and called, no answer. And then I realized he was in danger. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I knew I had to find him. Rocco shifted beside her, muscles coiled, ears forward as if confirming every word. Emily's gaze met his, and she drew strength from the silent affirmation. I went out into the night. I didn't know exactly where to look. Every street was empty, every shadow a threat. And then I remembered. Rocco had been with him. He could help me find him. And he did. Gasps ran through the courtroom as she described the frantic search, the wind tearing at her clothes, the rain soaking her hair, the terror clutching her chest. Jurors leaned forward, eyes wide, hanging on her every word. Even the gallery fell silent, captivated by the raw emotion that had replaced the sterile proceedings. Emily's hands trembled as she held up the journal, carefully turning its pages to the entries she had read before. He wrote about fear, about hiding, about someone following him. He mentioned the old warehouse on 14th, where he thought he could be safe. And I found that place because Rocco remembered. He led me to him, step by step. Klein's protests faltered, his voice barely audible. Even if this is true, you can't. Emily interrupted, voice rising with intensity. It is true, I was there. I saw him. I saved him. And Rocco, he remembers everything, and he guided me to the evidence no one else found. The jurors were silent, eyes wide with disbelief and fascination. They had never seen anything like this. A courtroom turned into a living reenactment, led by a woman and a dog revealing truths that had been hidden in shadows. The gallery murmured, journalists scribbled notes frantically, and even the judge's expression softened, a rare glimpse of awe in his seasoned eyes. Emily knelt beside Rocco once more, whispering, "There's one more thing. He was never alone that night, someone else was involved, and Rocco remembers that too." The courtroom's tension skyrocketed. Every head turned, every ear strained as if the words themselves carried electricity. Klein's face paled, his carefully rehearsed questions evaporating into thin air. He had no preparation for this, no strategy. This was uncharted territory. Emily rose, pointing toward the evidence cabinet where Rocco had led them. The journal mentioned names, hints of threats, and places he was forced to hide. When we uncovered it, there were signs, hidden messages, items misplaced deliberately. Rocco remembered all of it, and I followed him. Every step brought us closer to the truth. The jurors were leaning forward, the gallery silent except for the occasional gasp. Even Klein's composure cracked under the weight of her testimony and the dog's uncanny memory. He swallowed hard, trying to reclaim authority. "Ms. Voss, this is incredible, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. How do you prove that these events unfolded as you describe?" Emily's voice hardened, carrying a mix of determination and vulnerability. "Because Rocco remembers. He doesn't lie. He doesn't falter. He was there with me. He led me to every piece of evidence, and every piece confirms my story." She gestured to Rocco, who stood tall and unwavering, eyes fixed on her, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. The jurors' expressions shifted from skepticism to disbelief to awe. The gallery leaned in, the weight of the narrative pressing down on everyone present. Klein's frustration erupted. "This is impossible. Dogs don't remember events the way humans do. This is circumstantial, emotional manipulation." Emily's tears glistened, but her voice remained steady, resonating with truth. "No, it isn't manipulation, it's memory, it's instinct, it's loyalty, and it's proof. You wanted evidence, you have it. You wanted witnesses. You have the most loyal witness anyone could hope for. He saw the events, he remembers them, and he led us to the truth. The truth that no paper or camera could capture on its own." The courtroom fell silent, a tense, electric silence that seemed to stretch for minutes. Even the judge, who had seen countless cases and bizarre testimonies, appeared momentarily suspended, grappling with the reality of what had just unfolded. Emily knelt beside Rocco, stroking his head gently. "Good boy," she whispered. "We're almost done, but they need to understand everything, every step, every moment of that night and why it matters." The tension in the room was suffocating, as if everyone could feel the climax of the story approaching. The hidden threats, the missing moments, and the buried secrets of that night were all coming to light, guided by a dog and a woman whose bond had transcended fear, doubt, and disbelief. Klein, desperate to regain control, stepped forward, but his words faltered. The courtroom had shifted irrevocably. The story Emily and Rocco were telling could no longer be denied. The unraveling had begun, and the final truths were about to surface, no matter how much anyone tried to resist them. The jurors sat forward, hearts pounding, eyes wide, as Emily raised her voice one last time. The night is far from over. The truth is still buried in the shadows, but we're finding it piece by piece. And Rocco, he will not let it remain hidden. A low, resonant whine from Rocco punctuated her statement, sending a ripple of anticipation through the courtroom. Every person present understood, viscerally, that the story was far from finished. What had been uncovered so far was only the surface. Beneath it lay secrets that would shock them all, and Rocco was the key to uncovering them. The unraveling had begun, and nothing in the courtroom would ever be the same again. The courtroom was heavy with anticipation, each spectator holding their breath as Emily stood beside Rocco, the German shepherd whose unblinking gaze radiated loyalty, memory, and a silent authority. Every eye in the room seemed glued to the duo, every ear straining to catch the unfolding truth. The hidden evidence had been revealed, the first shocks had been delivered, and now the air seemed charged with the promise of a final, earth-shattering revelation. Emily swallowed, fighting the lump in her throat. She had walked this path countless times in her mind, replaying the moment she had realized the truth, but standing here, before the judge, the jury, the prosecution, and the gallery, the weight of it all pressed down like a physical force. Rocco shifted slightly, as if sensing her anxiety, and she took a deep, steadying breath. "Rocco remembers everything," she whispered, barely audible. Then, louder, addressing the court, not just where he was or the evidence he left behind, but who was involved, and why it happened. The courtroom erupted into a tense murmur. Jason Klein's face paled. He had anticipated many twists in the case, but he had not prepared for a witness who was not only instinctively precise, but also capable of revealing the connections no one had seen. He glanced at the judge, a flicker of desperation crossing his features. The judge raised a hand, restoring order. "Proceed carefully, Ms. Voss. State the facts. The court will evaluate the evidence." Emily nodded, her voice steady now, sharpened by the resolve that had carried her through countless sleepless nights. "It all started with the storm, with the night he disappeared. I followed Rocco, trusting his memory and instincts. And as we traced the path, as we uncovered every piece of hidden evidence, it became clear that he wasn't alone. Someone else was orchestrating it all. Someone close, someone I trusted." Gasps swept through the gallery. Jurors leaned forward, pens frozen in midair. Reporters scribbled frantically. Even the judge leaned in, eyebrows furrowed, sensing the weight of what was about to be revealed. Emily's hand trembled slightly as she reached into the evidence cabinet, pulling out a crumpled photograph she had discovered through Rocco's guidance. It depicted her fiancé, bound but unharmed, and a shadowy figure standing behind him, an indistinct silhouette, but the posture, the glint of the ring on the hand, the familiar stance, it was unmistakable to her. "This," she said, holding the photo up so everyone could see, "was the person orchestrating everything. The person I never suspected. The person who betrayed the trust of everyone involved." A stunned silence fell. The jurors gasped, some whispering to one another. Klein's mouth opened, then closed, words failing him. Even the gallery, filled with journalists, froze as if the air itself had been struck by lightning. Emily's voice dropped to a whisper and Rocco shifted closer to her, almost as if confirming her words. "It was her," Emily said, the words slicing through the room with the weight of a revelation. "Someone I thought was a friend. Someone who knew everything about our lives, our routines, our weaknesses. She orchestrated it, made him disappear, planted clues, and thought no one would notice. But she underestimated Rocco. The jurors' faces turned to shock, disbelief, horror. Some whispered in disbelief. The gallery erupted in a flurry of camera shutters. Klein finally found his voice, though it was strained and almost incredulous. This is incredible. How can you prove this? How do you establish intent, participation, or connection? Emily held up the journal, now trembling with the intensity of the moment. She left traces, careless, subtle, but enough. The journal mentioned things only she could have known, details that matched her handwriting style and her planning. But the key proof is here. Rocco whined softly, then moved forward, leading Emily to a small corner near the courtroom wall. There, hidden behind a stack of folders, was a tiny envelope previously overlooked. With deliberate precision, he pawed at it and nudged it toward her. Emily picked it up, opening it carefully. Inside were texts, emails, and photographs linking the betrayer directly to the disappearance. The planning, the execution, the manipulations, all traced back to her. The courtroom was silent. Every juror stared, eyes wide, some leaning forward as if to ensure they were seeing clearly. Klein's face drained of color. The gallery erupted with whispers, reporters frantically taking notes and snapping pictures. Even the judge leaned forward, gripping the bench, struggling to maintain order amidst the tsunami of revelation. Emily's voice rang out, clear and unwavering. She thought she could hide the truth, that the evidence would never surface, but she didn't account for loyalty, instinct, and memory. Rocco remembered everything. He led me to every piece of evidence, every clue, every proof of what happened that night. The jurors exchanged stunned glances. Emily's attorney, Thomas Gray, stepped forward, voice firm. "Your Honor, this is not hearsay or speculation. The dog's guidance has led to tangible, verifiable evidence that connects the orchestrator directly to the crime. The chain of discovery is clear, documented, and corroborated." The gallery was silent now, the weight of the revelation pressing down like a physical force. Klein's protests fell flat, drowned in the undeniable truth laid bare before the court. Emily knelt beside Rocco once more, placing a hand on his massive head. "Good boy," she whispered. Then she stood, facing the court with fierce determination. "The final revelation is this. Rocco didn't just help me find him. He helped me uncover the truth about everything. The betrayal, the fear, the hidden danger, it all ends here. Justice will be served and the truth cannot be hidden any longer." A low, resonant whine escaped Rocco, echoing like a final confirmation. The jurors shifted, captivated, the weight of the moment pressing into every corner of the room. The judge finally spoke, his voice steady but heavy with gravity. "The court acknowledges the evidence presented through the guidance of the dog and the testimony of Ms. Voss. The corroboration of events, the discovery of physical evidence, and the uncovering of orchestrated deception are undeniable. This court will proceed, taking into account the extraordinary circumstances that have brought us to this point." Klein's shoulders slumped. His carefully constructed case had been dismantled, piece by piece, by a combination of human courage and canine instinct. The courtroom had shifted irreversibly, and he knew it. Emily's eyes glistened with tears, but her expression was resolute. She looked at Rocco, who sat patiently, ears pricked, tail low but steady. "We did it," she whispered. "We found the truth, no matter how hidden, no matter how impossible it seemed." The jurors, gallery, and courtroom staff absorbed the finality of the moment. The story that had begun with a disappearance, a stormy night, and fear had culminated in a revelation that was cinematic, intense, and unflinchingly real. Emily's trust in Rocco, her perseverance, and the dog's unwavering memory had unveiled the full extent of betrayal and danger that no human investigation alone could have achieved. Outside, the winter sun was beginning to rise, casting golden light across the city. Inside the courtroom, the revelation had brought an emotional climax that few would ever forget. Emily and Rocco had led the court through fear, suspense, betrayal, and ultimately, truth. And as she looked around the courtroom, at faces etched with shock, disbelief, and awe, Emily knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The dog who remembered everything had done more than guide her to evidence. He had rewritten the course of justice, revealed the depths of betrayal, and illuminated a truth so profound that no one could ignore it. The final revelation had been delivered. And the world, for everyone in that courtroom, would never forget the night a woman's 2 words to a police dog shook the entire courtroom to its core. Justice had found its way, not through force, not through fear, but through loyalty, instinct, and unwavering memory.